Again. as president and subversive of constitutional government, to the great prejudice of the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. That has been proved. Whereas, or wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, did in a manner grossly incompatible with self-government and the rule of law. That has been proved. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. That will be for you to determine. Let me say something about this second article. The facts of the President's defiance of Congress are very simple, because they were so uniform, because they were so categorical, because they are so uncontested. But do not mistake for a moment the fact that it was simple and quick to present that course of conduct compared with a sophisticated campaign to coerce Ukraine into thinking that that second article is any less significant than the first. Do not believe that for a moment. If there is no Article 2, let me tell you something. There will never be an Article 1. If there's no Article 2, there will never, of any kind or shape or form, be an Article 1. And why is that? Because if you and we lack the power to investigate a president, there will never be an Article 1. Whether that Article 1 is abuse of power, or that Article 1 is treason, or that Article 1 is bribery, there will never be an Article 1 if the Congress can't investigate an impeachable offense. If the Congress cannot, because the President prevents it, investigate the President's own wrongdoing, there will never be an Article 1. Because there will be no more impeachment power. It will be gone. It will be gone. As I said before, our relationship with Ukraine will survive. God willing, our relationship with Ukraine will survive, and Ukraine will prosper, and we will get beyond this ugly chapter of our history. But if we are to decide here that a President of the United States can simply say, under Article 2, I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to treat a co-equal branch of government like it exists.
I had a dream the other night that, well,
I don't have to give it any more than the back of my...
A figure walked in through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed.
Injury to this country.
He took off his three-cornered
Ukraine will
hat
survive.
And speaking low to me,
and so will we, but that
we fought a revolution
will be an unending injury to this country.
We wrote
because the balance of power that our founders set out will never be the same.
For future generations, this legacy we gave
will never be the same.
In this, the land of the free.
If a president can simply say, I'm going to fight all
freedoms we secured for you, we hope you'd always
And I'll
keep.
tell you something else.
But tyrants
Truism in the courts
while your parents
is just as true here in the Senate.
Your freedom's gone, your
where
courage
they
lost,
say
you're no more
justice
than a
delayed
slave.
is justice denied.
In this, the land
You
of the
give
free.
this president or any other the unilateral power to delay as long as he or she likes,
permits to start a
to
business
litigate matters for years and years in the courts, and do not fool yourself into thinking it is anything less.
Although you have no voice in saying how the money's spent.
In April, it will be a
Your
year
children
since
must
we
attend a
subpoenaed Don
school that
McGahn,
doesn't educate,
and there is no sign of an
and
end to
your
that
Christian
case.
values can't be taught. According
And
to
I'll tell you, when it gets to the Supreme Court, you might
read
think
about the
that's
current
the
news
end,
in a regulated
and that's
press,
just
and you
the
pay
end
a
of the
tax
first
you do
chapter.
not owe to please the IRS.
Because Don McGahn is in court saying,
Your
I'm
money is no
absolutely
longer
immune
made of silver
from
nor of
testing.
gold. You trade your wealth for
Now, that's
paper,
been rejected by
so
every
your
court
life
that's
can be
looked at it.
controlled. You pay for
But
crimes that make our nation
we'll see what the
turn
Court of
from
Appeals
God
says,
and
and then we'll
shame.
see if it goes to an en banc Court of Appeals, and then we'll see what the Supreme Court says. And when we prevail in the Supreme Court,
You've given
you know what
government
happens?
control to those who do
That's
you
not
harm.
the end of the matter.
So they could
It
burn down
comes back to
churches
the trial
and
court,
seize
and
the family
then,
farm.
well, they
keep
can't
our
claim
country
absolute immunity anymore. They
deep in
can't
debt.
claim that
Put
we
men
don't
of
even have
God
to
in
bother
jail.
showing up.
Harass your fellow
So now
countrymen
we're going
while
to turn to
corrupted
Plan
courts
B,
prevail.
executive privilege.
Your public servants don't uphold
We're
the
going to say
solemn
we
oaths
can't
they've
and won't
sworn.
answer any of the questions that are
Your
really
daughters
pertinent to your impeachment inquiry.
So the
And let's
children,
start out in district court, and then go to the Court of Appeals, and
your
then go on
leaders
banc,
send
and then go to the
artillery
Supreme Court.
and guns to foreign shores
You
and
can
send
game
your
the
sons
system
to slaughter
for
fighting other
years.
people's wars.
Justice
Can you
delayed is
regain the
justice
freedom
denied,
for
and
which we
so
fought
is
and
true
died?
about presidential
Or don't you have the
accountability.
courage
So
and the faith to
when
stand
you
with
suggest,
pride?
or I suggest, or
And
anyone
are there
suggests,
no
or the
more
White House
values
suggests,
for which you'll fight to save?
why doesn't the Congress,
Do you
why
wish
didn't the
your
House
children
just
to live in
exhaust
fear,
their remedies?
be a slave?
As if in the Constitution
Oh,
where it
sons of the
says
Republic,
the House shall have the
arise,
sole power
take
of
a
impeachment,
stand,
there's an asterisk
defend the
that says
Constitution, the supreme law of the
for exhausting
land.
all court remedies.
Preserve our
Go see the
great
Court of
republic
District
and
Court,
each
then seek relief in the
God-given
Court of
right.
Appeals, and after that, go to the Supreme Court.
And pray to God.
Let's
Keep
not
the
kid
torch of
ourselves
freedom
about what that really
right.
means.
As
What
I
that
awoke,
really
he
means is
vanished in the
you
mist
allow
from whence
the
he came.
president to
His
control
words were true.
the
We
timing
are not
of his
free,
own impeachment,
but we have ourselves to
or
blame.
if it will ever.
For even now, as tyrants trample each
permitted
God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight.
That is
As
not
he
an
stood
impeachment
by your
power, that is
bedside
the
to dream while
absence
you were
of
asleep
an impeachment
and
power.
wondered what remains of the freedoms he
Article
fought
2
to
is
keep.
every bit as important as Article
What would be
1.
your answer
Without Article
if he
2,
called out
there is
from the
no
grave?
Article 1 ever
Is
again.
this
No matter
still
how
the land of the
egregious
free
this president's conduct or
and
any other,
home of the brave?
it is fundamental
God
to the
bless
separation
you.
of powers. If you
God bless
can't
this
have the
republic.
ability to enforce an impeachment power, you might as well not put it in the Constitution. Now, shortly, the president's lawyers will have a chance to make their presentation. And as we will not have the
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the third hour of the Intelligence Report. I'm Mark Kornke.
And butter knife.
One day closer to victory for all of our brothers and sisters, both on and behind the lines in occupied territories, southwest, east, northeast, and central. Ladies and gentlemen, you were listening to us on LibertyTreeRadio.4mg.com, AM and FM micro stations, AM and FM conventional stations, and UltraNet, Hallmark, and Golden Spike Technologies, east and west of the Mississippi, along with Alaska. Good afternoon and evening to all our friends out there across the whole of the United States. It has been raining here. In fact, if it keeps it up, we're going to lose a big chunk of whatever snow we have. If this was snow between this and the last rain that we had, we would be buried up to our eyeballs right now. But as it is, we're being blessed to a degree. There are advantages and disadvantages. General Mud is back in service. We still have snow on the ground. If it drops in temperature, it's going to be ice. Lots and lots and lots of really bad, nasty ice. So we'll see what happens. Right now, though, temperatures are a little above freezing. We're still getting kind of a drizzly rain on and off. It's been constant and looks like it's going to keep pushing on us for the time being. There's nothing in the way of relief tonight anyway. BK, what's it like in your neck of the woods? What's the date today and what's jumping off the wall over there by the Big Muddy?
It is 24 January 2020. How did we get this far? Who would have thought? It is Friday evening. This is the last hour of the day and the week for the Intelligence Report, and that makes this Quartermaster's Corner. And we have the same yucky pucky as you guys do. You can take 3 tennis balls and write on each of them snow, rain, cold, and start juggling them. And whichever one flashes in front of your eyes, that's what you're going to get that day. I mean, I don't like this at all. I guess it's January and it's entitled to do it, but I still don't like it. Not one little bit. I want spring to come. We had such a nice, warm, late winter. I would have liked that to continue. I don't care what all the hairspray and SUV cultists have to say about global warming and all that sort of stuff. When it's all cold and nasty and snowy out there, I don't like it. So, I have this debate with people on a regular basis, and I point out, well, the light from the sun is fluctuating, and every time we warm up, Mars warms up, moons of Saturn warm up, Venus warms up, and then, we drop a little bit, and they all drop a little bit, and that's because of SUV and hairspray. I don't think they sell that many Suburbans on Mars, but oh well, you can't get through to people that have been heavily propagandized for years and whose social acceptance depends upon them towing the line. And this is one of the things that the lefty cult does to people. So, it's kind of sad, but it works. So, you got to figure there's going to be some sociopathic vermin who will work any given angle as long as it works. Life in the material universe among the mere mortals and all that kind of good stuff. There's some stuff that's going on that's kind of interesting. One of them, this is old news. This is a couple of weeks old, I guess, but it's going to be kind of funny. It's developing as we speak, though not rapidly. Mark, you'll remember this Jussie Smollett clown who pulled a political stunt, which kind of involved false police reports and things like that.
Right, it kind of phased out. Well, actually, it's still in some circles, depending where you are, going to which news service right now, in the independent news service. Go ahead.
Right. The short recap is that this guy is an actor. I guess he's well known. I have no idea. I certainly have never even seen an episode of the program he's on or was on before he screwed up. He's a gay guy, and he hired a couple of other gay guys that he knows, maybe more than that, to pretend to attack him and to be evil MAGA people who are beating up on him and hung a noose on his neck and all this kind of stuff. And then he went and made a police report and played the victim and all this kind of good stuff. People dug into that and figured out that it was all fake. And, he was going to be in a fair amount of trouble, and a Democrat politically connected prosecutor waved the magic wand and made all the charges go away, which rather outraged people because, if you or I make a false police report, our behinds are suddenly going to increase in temperature by several hundred degrees. And his did not. And now he's back in the soup because, there was so much outrage over that stunt, over that fraud, that they've found some charges they can pursue, and they're investigating the case. The interesting part about it is that a court recently issued an order or a subpoena or something for a 1-year Google dump of this guy's interactions. This is fascinating. When that happens, people are going to be absolutely astonished at how much stuff Google knows about you, especially if you're using Gmail. I gather that he did. That means that everything that goes to their Gmail account, even if if you've deleted things a while ago, there's a backup archive somewhere, and they can dig that out if they want to. I don't think that something you said 5 years ago is going to be in active memory in a server somewhere, but it can be found. The other thing is he might use Google Voice or something along those lines. A lot of people do. That's sort of a substitute for long-distance telephone. And there's some speculation about how much data that retains, whether it makes a text transcript in real time, the sort of stuff. I assume that it does. I don't know. I just, take the worst case assumption, so I don't use it. But if he used it, that means that all his voice phone calls would have transcripts somewhere, and that too would be fascinating. So this is a developing story, but it's really entertaining one. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Some creep that can't even come up with his own arguments. He has to fake an incident to try to smear everybody that's on the other side of the political line from himself. Well, he's a young guy, and young guys tend to be stupid. Sorry, apologies to all the young guys out there, but your friends and relatives and similar demographics tend to be kind of stupid. And maybe we can chalk it up to that, but I don't care. This guy deserves to have lots and lots of problems for quite a while. The way our system works is people do not pay the price that is on the books unless they are a strong political target. Who spends nobody anywhere spends 7 years in the monastery for assault, right? Being rammed by a car. Mark, you can attest to that. Nobody ever does that, right?
Well, it's fascinating again with these characters. This is we have several situations we can see over the last year and a half. Well, actually, no, in the last year, where we have creatures like this that have absolutely fabricated garbage. They've been given lots of publicity, or the Antifa, quote unquote professor, if you want to call him that. That beat down 6 people with a Krypton bike lock. Now, you walk out with a piece of steel and you beat on one person, and you've got yourself felony assault.
Yeah, if you or I had a chunk of rebar, that's a deadly weapon.
Yeah, well, this is a Krypton lock, guaranteed. Remember they give you all the impossible to cut, impossible to. Well, that means beating on somebody with it, it's not going to break. It has no possibility of failure when it comes to attacking a human being.
Well, the body of that lock is a heavy thing. That's for all practical purposes a Morningstar.
Yeah, it's a bludgeon. And the thing is that this person was beyond a shadow of a doubt attack 6. There's 3 or 4 more that came into the picture afterwards. And literally everything was dropped to a misdemeanor. Now we have this character, and again, it's that they're counting on there's no ramification. There's no punishment, which is, again, a big mistake. There truly is. If the prostituter did their job, then there is the ability to prevent this from happening, from stopping it dead in its tracks. But the prostituters like this because it creates business for them. And, oh, by the way, since they are with a fellow traveler buddy, they'll give them the wink and the nod, as we have seen repeatedly. And all of a sudden, these characters are back out on the street. Now, it's one thing if it was, again, it was questionable. This person was caught. The person who was attacking, who was going out of his way. In fact, he was blindsiding pretty much all of his victims. And it was caught on video every time. As they went back through, they realized the same character was monkey poking and beating down these people over and over again. That's how he got caught. Everybody's got a camera nowadays. In the other case, it was demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt. And by the way, the people that he hired to lie already had pretty well flipped on him. So guess what? That kind of bumble screwed that to begin with. Again, when you're talking about these types of attacks, this type of an attack, an absolute lie, putting people's lives at risk. Because the cops especially love using as an excuse, felony assault, we can go out there, we really harass this person, we can really beat this person down. And that's exactly the attitude that they have. So for everybody out there thinks, there's no big deal. Really? Have you ever dealt with the cops? Have you ever watched the cops in motion? You ever go to 1,000 videos of how they operate and tell me that your life isn't at risk the moment some fool calls the cops? In fact,
basically, a lot of them are a better dressed biker gang.
Yeah, and again, I was just looking. Somebody just sent me the latest list of people beat to death or murdered in one form or another here in the last couple of weeks, and it's like in each case, the autopsy shows like multiple contusions, broken bones with each of the autopsies, and it's like, repeat, repeat, and at a certain point, everybody should be gaining the attitude that it's time that this be, we put a stop to this. But they count on the other idea on the other side that they'll just keep stretching it out, making it disappear, and nobody will remember the last one when the next one happens. Except these were all pretty stinking close, and it's a consistent way that they act. And the casualty, not just wounded. I mean, for every one that's killed, you got to figure how many dozens are wounded like that.
And we don't talk about the wounded.
Right. And the ones that are in the hospital, there were some with comas that were listed in this one. But there again, how many were, damaged to the point of no return? And if you hang on for a few months, everybody can forget about you while you die quietly in the hospital after you're in a coma for a little bit.
And then nobody has enough money for your estate to sue the guy and so on and so forth. So, it all eventually gets swept under the rug.
So everybody forgets it. And that's exactly what they can count on over and over until people finally start to work together, rally up, look at the problem, and then deal with the problem, which is where we are right now. We need to deal with the problem. But in this case, this is from the other direction. Literally the prostituter, the next problem we have, of course, arbitrarily enforced. If it's political and it profits the quadriplegic, homosexual, pedophilic, Eskimos, then in a heartbeat. But if all of a sudden it's one of these Twilight Zone creatures from the other side, wink and a nod, and that's their man or woman or guppy or I don't know what they are anymore. It's 27 sexes. 20, so again, this is not going to go away. In fact, it's going to continue to be an issue up until the point where we actually end up with a war for independence, which is where we're headed and why nobody should be surprised about this. It's another reason, as I pointed out in the 2-hour block, guys, if this thing kicks off, do you realize how many people have scores to settle with these people in uniform? And they're going to figure that they can blame the militia. I mean, most people are like, I've got a list, and I've got a list, and I've got a list, and I've got a list. And, y'all have lists? Yeah. And it's like, well, guess what? There's a lot of people you don't even know about. The moment they think they can blame you and me, they're going out on their list. And some of them, people have had their children stolen, people who have, had their houses taken, their lives have been ruined in their mind. And for them, it's the idea that once this opportunity arises, the level and type of attacks that are going to be coming at the other side from so many obliques, and they will blame us. Be ready for that. Here's my attitude. Who cares? At that point, if you're at war and you have a shopping list, and unfortunately for you, the other side is, being taken out to the point where, man, I got to make a new list. What do you mean? Well, we went to that guy's place. He's dead. We went to the other guy's place. The cops are there, and he's dead, and then somebody killed the cops. In fact, I've only got 3 people left on my list, and it looks like somebody else filled it out for me. Except that, wait a minute, there's some more machine gun fire down the street, and, there's some more on somebody else's list dying.
Well, if somebody's been enough of a problem, chances are they've been a problem to multiple people. So, that's you get to be the star in the Orient Express, right? If you've left this wake of people behind you that kind of, hoping that you fall down a manhole, then if something happens, they don't even know who the suspect is because it's half the town.
The only option they have is to, macro blame, and that's what everybody be ready for it. Just like, what's your point? Oh, my God, they killed prostitute or so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, well, good. That sounds good by me. What's your point? Why are you asking me? I didn't do it. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't on the list of things to do, but we didn't do it. Somebody else did. For that matter, now that you've shown up, you're on my list, too, so you're not leaving.
Those buggers, they killed Kenny. Good.
Yeah. Oh, they killed Kenny. You bastards. Remember, they always do that last cue. Oh, you bastards. So we are in that situation right now with regard to these characters being, shall we say, just a little too arrogant. The character that did it and the other people who are waiting to deal with the problem, who are tired of that arrogance.
I get the impression that the DA or prosecutor or something that gave him a pass is in hot water, too. I haven't been following it in any detail. I don't care enough about this clown to exert the mouse clicks to track it closely. I certainly do hope that the political apparatchik is willing to completely throw a legitimate case out the window for, as a political favor, crashes and burns and somehow, but I am not optimistic enough to expect that to actually happen. I do remember watching a case a while back in Florida, some election fraud. There are some officials there who were really caught on video, basically rigging a local election, and it was on broadcast television and all this kind of good stuff. And I do remember hearing that case a year or two on down the road. They basically swept it under the rug, and the guilty official got a few months of probation or something along that line, and went right back to being an election official. So, but in Florida, in the Democrat Party, I guess there aren't any crimes as long as you're serving the orthodoxy of that party. But it's a similar situation, and reminds me of it. How there can be the most enormous hue and cry, and they wait for a while for the dust to settle, and then they just sweep it under the rug and let people off the hook and so on. We talk about selective prosecution, but that's sort of selective unprosecution, right? So.
Well, another thing that's coming up here, like you said, when you have the case like this, you've got a series of other actions that we can anticipate in preparation for the next wave with the gun grabs, because there are going to be a number of interesting responses by people, too, much in the same way that everybody's fed up from the other direction. Hey, we're tired of this. It is inevitable that when they attempt to go after the guns, that there's going to be some, interaction between the population and the gun grabbers that is not going to bode well for the gun grabbers. It's not an if, it's just a when. And I would remind everybody that the overlapping, there are a lot of people who won't really differentiate between the fact that they were gun grabbing or grabbing someone's kids or stealing property or whatever they've been doing. If they see them and can take advantage of the situation, they're probably going to be pitching in, and you may be surprised at where your help is coming from down the road. And this is something that we always need to remind everybody about, because there are a number of other people out there that are pretty well squared away, ready to roll, and they're going to be coming in, pitching in as need be. And they know what these people have been doing. There's a lot of quiet people who have just been collecting a long, long list of abuses. And to be quite honest, it's as likely as not that those people, totally disassociated from absolutely everybody in most of your minds, that will get things started, that are going to be the ones to kick things off. The other half of that is, if they're in a neighborhood and looks like something is, cooking or brewing, and it's, right there in their backyard, it's as likely as not also that they're going to just simply pitch in because they think they're the objective.
Yeah, the sad part about all of this is that everything is an abuse, and then any response to it is an overreaction. This is the way humans operate. There are a lot of cops out there who are not jerks. I've encountered a few of them. A very small percentage of my contacts with the police have been non-jerks. I mean, I think that I estimate I've been stopped something like 40 times. The majority of those times I was driving an old 72 Fury 3 that I bought at a police auction, and they didn't like the remnants of the paint that were on that car. So you'd be amazed how frequently I got pulled over, how many times I made an illegal left turn even though I'd been driving straight for 10 miles, or, all of this stuff. There was just, pressure to try to paint the car. I count those as not clean cops, but I've encountered a few that were not total jerks. Only a few months ago, I was driving down the road, got pulled over, and the cop says, your plates are several months out of date. And I said, oh, okay, and I reached down and pulled out these brand new license plates. I just got these yesterday. And he just kind of looks at me and says, have a nice one. And he leaves. He could have pinged me for not having them mounted, but he decided not to be a jerk. There are some out there who are not jerks. Of course, they are somewhat guilty because they cover for the bad guys, okay? And I can't argue what percentage they are. But let me pose a question this way. If you've got a 5-gallon punch bowl and there's only a little itty-bitty poop floating around in that punch bowl, are you going to drink that punch? I would say no. It's only a small percentage of the punch that's a poop floating around in it, but I'm not drinking it. You know, it's no good. A tiny amount of contamination ruins the whole thing. One bad apple ruins the barrel, is the old saying. Okay, so, you know, when the cops don't clean out these bad guys among their numbers, they all become guilty of what the bad guys did. And you know, I don't think they understand it. I do think that the vampires understand it because they want the whole system to be corrupt and as, you know, rotten, expensive, and abusive as possible. But, you know, this is, you know, in every society, the police's real job is not to protect people, but to maintain the political hierarchy. But there are some decent ones out there. And I don't know if there are 2% or 98% of them are good guys, and, you know, the reverse are the stinkers. But it doesn't matter. As long as they're covering for the stinkers, that makes them stinky too. And until they get the idea that they have to keep an eye out, and when they smell something whiffy, deal with it, until that happens, and I don't think it's ever happened in history, we can't trust them. You know, and that's one of the reasons that the proliferation of cameras is actually a good thing, because you can count on the body cams to have mysterious and convenient technical failures whenever somebody is alleging that wrongdoing has happened. Just like those cameras around Epstein's cell, you know, it's amazing how those things always go out. Or the cameras around, you know, the Murrow building just before it went bang. Or all of the cameras ringing the Pentagon and all of the buildings nearby, you know, for something like a mile or two. Everything has technical failures whenever something interesting happens. So those are all fixed, stationary, easily cataloged in advance cameras. The ones that people are carrying around on their own, that they own themselves, that don't have any particular, you know, inventory list or registration or whatnot. You can offload them, squirt the video somewhere in a hurry, that kind of stuff. Those are a wild card, and those actually serve our purposes. The ones that are sitting on every traffic light and all that sort of stuff, that does not serve our purposes. That doesn't help us much, and it hurts us a lot, you know, just as citizens. But the ones that are walking around in people's pockets or in their hands or what have you do serve a purpose. We don't know yet what the end result will be of all of this, you know, practically everything where there's a human, there's a video image. We don't know how much effect that's going to have or how things are going to work out. It'll be interesting to see over the next maybe 20 years or so how that works, if I'm still here. But it is a phase change. It is an example of technology actually changing the rules of the game, right? This, I think, is also probably the driving impetus behind some other stuff, which kind of leads me into another topic that I had planned for today. We have talked about this in the past. The FAA has promulgated a bunch of rules applied to drones, which means any sort of radio control flying thing. So we've had RC airplanes for a century now, very nearly a century. My dad, when he was a teenager in the 1940s, built a one vacuum tube radio controlled model airplane. I mean, you know, this has been going on forever and ever and ever. And sometime in the last year or two, they suddenly became a terrible threat to national security and blah, blah, blah. Well, they became this big threat to national security about the time that the camera technologies got light enough and good enough quality that a quadcopter or an RC plane or whatnot flying over a crowd can actually show you what's going on, down to the point of maybe being able to identify an individual if you're lucky. I don't think it's any coincidence that now that the technology is good enough that Antifa can't get away with anything, that suddenly there are heavy restrictions on drones. they don't want a drone flying over Ferguson showing a bunch of acts of rioting and looting and arson and so on, and then proceeding another block or two and showing the cops standing around eating donuts.
Actually, that is what happened. That's one of the reasons that when Ferguson was being observed, the night that happened, there was a drone feed that demonstrated exactly that. That was private. And that was before they made the big announcement that we have to stop this. You guys can't fly. We're going to create restricted areas. Well, of course they are, because literally you had the state police and the National Guard down the road while Ferguson was being attacked, and they were all sitting on their dead ass doing nothing while the local police were trying desperately to keep the place from being burned down.
Of course, if they had acted against orders, they'd have been toast. So.
Right, so they're stuck, under orders right there to just watch the place burn down, which should tell everybody something, right? We've kind of warned people about this. Real quick.
Let me continue this thread. So we got this wave of restrictions that you can't fly over humans, you've got to be within line of sight, all of this kind of stuff. That's pretty odious. And they also rolled out a requirement that any drone pilot, meaning anybody that owns one and wants to fly it, if you've got a drone that's over a half a pound, which is pretty much anything, well, you have to contact the FAA and take a little test and pay a fee and license and register yourself. And then you have to register every little drone that you own, and you have to put the markings on the drone, and then you've got all these operational restrictions and blah, blah, blah. The fees are not high. They always start low. That's how you boil a frog. But those rules are already in effect. I suspect the compliance rate is extremely low. I certainly haven't registered myself as an enemy of the state. I mean, an owner of a drone. But then again, I'll raise my right hand and say, "Oh, I've never flown anything outdoors. Do you believe me?" I don't know anybody who has actually done all that paperwork and nonsense. Now, this is developing in real time right now. There is a whole new wave of drone regulations the FAA is proposing. And right now, we are in the comment period. The way they do this is they propose a bunch of rules, then they have a month or two or three period for public comment, and you get to have your say, and then they do exactly as they please. This is the way it works. So they pretend that you get to have a little bit of input, and then they do exactly what they intended before to do. Now, Mark and I tend to disagree a lot. I tend to give an awful lot of benefit of the doubt to the Trumpster, and he does not. But here's a case where we agree. If you were doing the right thing, the Trumpster would just give a sharp yank on the FAA's leash and say, enormous expenditure, very little benefit, outrage the public. Nah, that equation doesn't work out. However, he has not. And they're moving forward, and they will almost certainly push through the new set of rules. The new set of rules say that not only in addition to all the other crud, but if you actually want to fly your drone over a half a pound, now you're going to have to install electronic tracking in the thing. The electronic tracking has to broadcast position signals, and it has to connect into the internet and inform the FAA from second to second its exact position and velocity continuously. There are the only places you can fly non-communicating, unregistered drones are a few special airfields, and there are only a few dozen of them to be designated around the country, and no new ones can be created once this goes into effect. And anytime one of those changes its rules and says we like fixed-wing model aircraft and not quadcopters, or it changes hands and the new owner says I'm putting up a parking lot instead of an RC field, or whatnot. Anytime any of those go out of service, no new ones can be created to replace them. So it's obviously one of these. You can have a few little Indian reservations, and after a few years, they'll all be gone. It's one of those, dishonest proposals. So they want you to put these electronic modules in the drones, have all these permissions, continuously connect to the internet in order to report your drone's position, which means that there's an awful lot of places you cannot fly if you can't get internet to a drone. And then at the same time, the restrictions all say you can't fly near any humans. So, where are you going to be able to find the infrastructure to connect your drone wirelessly to the internet? Well, this is where the humans are. If you go out into some, 100,000 acre zone in Montana someplace where you're actually allowed to fly something, well, guess what? No internet, can't fly it. And the FAA says, oh, this is for public safety, implying that somehow a bunch of stupid rules like this are going to prevent, Ahmed Bad Guy from trying to buzz an airport, Well, we all know that's not going to happen. After all, there are rules that Ahmed Bad Guy isn't supposed to place energetic devices where humans are. And Ahmed Bad Guy is not supposed to shoot people. And so on and so on and so on. But Ahmed Bad Guy does these things because he doesn't care about the rules. So, slopping these horrible rules and regulations all over the general public in the vain hope that supposedly it's going to inconvenience some bad guy somewhere is absolutely absurd. They want to protect airports, and they should. They're going to have to take technical measures that will shoot down or electronically zap or something any incoming hostile, because rules inflicted on the rule-abiding public are not going to do anything about any actual bad guy. But meanwhile, they're proposing this god-awful, horrendous, absurd mess. And it's going on right now. If you feel like it, and I encourage people to do it, go ahead and hand compose your own letter. Don't ever send in a form letter. Those just get circular filed. And tell them why it's a bad idea. I would say emphasize that this is extremely expensive, both for the individuals and for the administration, that it's going to accomplish very little and it's going to outrage the public. And if you pass a rule that's so bad that nobody obeys it, then you're going to get less effect than if you pass some mild little rule that did actually have some effect and that people are willing to comply with, even if it's not all that super duper effective against bad guys. Something that accomplishes a modest amount and does not infringe a lot is going to be more effective than something that is incredibly draconian, and everybody just kind of looks at it like people looked at the news in the Soviet Union. Yeah, right, that's what they're doing this week. Okay, fine. What's going on? So if you feel like it, feel free to, handwrite a letter or hand type a letter or whatnot, send it in the FAA and tell them, this is a really bad idea, guys. Here's a set of rules that might work, but what you're proposing is a god-awful mess. This is going on right now. If you don't feel like actually lifting a finger in that direction, and I'm going to shake my finger at you if that's the case, one of the other things you might do is you might start picking up a few drones and squirreling them away. Because eventually we're going to get to the point where they've all got these tracking modules built into the controller, and you won't even be able to power the thing up and fly it unless you enter your cryptographic ID code or some kind of garbage like that. There's technology out there which can really cause you major problems and inconvenience if you decide to just disregard the rules, because like we say, if you stand still long enough, sooner or later somebody's going to plink you. The technology exists to really put you in a bottle and seal you up if you let them do it to you. Right now is the time when you get to make the choice of whether you're going to let them do it to you, or you're at least going to kick and fuss and squall a bit while they do it to you. And there's always the tiny microscopic chance that you might actually get them to back off a little bit, but not unless you lift a finger. So this is my suggestion that people do lift a finger, that you scream at your congressman and your senator and the FAA and so on and so forth. Probably won't do any good, but you may as well at least try. That's my position. Go ahead.
Well, again, with what we've got going on right now, it's pretty obvious that the bad guys are in motion in about a dozen states hardcore. The fact that they're extremely worried about the idea that you have on-time delivery in terms of intelligence means, as we've said, it's not that it's a toy, but it's a really cool toy that's useful, and it's something that we can put into service. Everybody needs to look at integrating the RC toy / drones into operations. However, I'm going to point something out. Since a lot of you either don't want to spend the money or haven't been able to because the better ones do cost a chunk of change, simple cameras, simple recordable video cameras can be mounted. We've done it. In fact, you've seen some of the footage in some of the Patriot videos. I believe Hutari has some of the footage from one of the balloon actions that they did with a tethered balloon. They actually have one of their videos that's over on the Hutari channel, over on YouTube, the old one. And that is another solution. If the drones become an issue simply because of lack of availability or parts, or again, eventually, if this proceeds a little bit and they have time to integrate the new controls, as in integrating the new restrictions into the hardware, balloons are awfully cheap. Cameras are simple. You raise them, you collect the data, you pull it back down. You get a few moments worth of hesitation, but you can get very quick on-time delivery. And if you want to go a little farther with it, a little bigger balloon cluster, you can run a hard line right up rather than wireless. Wireless can be used, but why do that if you can do hard line and you don't have to worry about somebody else intercepting the image?
Well, there's other approaches you can take. For instance, you can take advantage of the technology that's being built for the drones. You can get FPV, that's first-person view. You can get little goggles. Some of them, you stick a cell phone in there, and some of them actually have all the electronics required. What these things are is basically just old analog television receivers that operate at a very high frequency, like 5.8 gigahertz or something like that. The cameras that people stick on their drones, if they didn't have them built in, are fairly cheap and simple. They're little guys. They're sugar cube size. They have a mushroom-style antenna. If you Google that, you'll see what it looks like for kind of flat omnidirectional transmission. And they just transmit an analog television signal just like the stuff that used to go out over the air in the U.S. And that's what your first-person goggles pick up. Those little cameras run anywhere from $25 to $35, start to finish, for some really good ones.
Real quick, BK, while you're on the subject of cameras, with what Dad was talking about with like the weather balloons, 5,000 feet of telephone patch cable. Doesn't have to be the best in the world. One of the little ice cube cameras that you can get, just a singular camera, color, black or white, doesn't matter, from Harbor Freight, and hook that up to the bottom of the balloon, and your cord is your tether. And because they plug in, they literally plug into a telephone line. Your power and everything goes right up that, and you can run it on those. Just send it up.
One of our
plugs right in. You're
actually did this quite successfully. Has done it more than a few times.
They won't even know it's up there. It can't be intercepted like the television transmission can be, and you can go as long as you got cable for it.
Yeah, figure out the weight per meter of the line and size your balloon to match.
It's not that bad with a weather balloon. We're not talking about like using a regular balloon.
Do the arithmetic and figure out how much lift you need and so on and so forth. The point that I was going to make is that a drone, a quadcopter, an RC plane or whatnot is a terrific platform because, it's a distance off the ground, so it's hard to reach. It's hard to shoot, even if you're a skeet shooter, if you go up above geese range. It moves fast, and it's got a lot of range. It's not the only platform that you can use, though. There are radio-controlled trucks and you can put one of those cameras on a radio-controlled truck and, have it go trundling across the ground. It's low and slow and can be stomped on and so forth, but it's another eyeball. So, be creative about this. You can use those cameras that are intended to be mobile, but you can make them stationary. Now, you're not going to be able to run them 24/7. They don't have that kind of duty cycle. They don't have the heat sinking necessary. You'd have to modify them to improve the heat sinking. And I don't think that those camera chips and transmitters are necessarily specified to survive, 10,000 hours of operation or whatnot. They probably average, 100 hours of operation before they just simply die. But they're also cheap and expendable, and you can put them on other platforms or in other spots. So, be creative about these things. Put them in places where nobody would expect them. You've seen people offering for sale fake rocks to put your car keys in or your house keys in if you lock yourself out. Why not put a camera in there? You have to provide a power supply for it, but that could be a solar panel that's 20 feet away. Half under a bush. It doesn't have to be totally efficient. It could be, very large batteries. It could be a little thread-thin wire from the house out to the device to, continuously trickle charge a lithium-ion battery. There's a lot of things you can do. Use your creativity. Start with the pieces that are available off the shelf and mix and match.